Living in a small town, I was confined to a two-story house with my parents and older sister, Emily. Though she was just 3 years older, it felt as though we lived on separate worlds. Mom stayed home most of the time, occasionally lending assistance to Dad's modest cafe, which almost kept us afloat. Not much, but most of us anyway, were not starving. "Emily, honey, that essay was absolutely amazing," Mom was gushing one night during a school function. "You're going to do such great things. You just are so gifted." Clutching my own participation medal from the school spelling bee, I stood in the doorway utterly invisible. This is always how it was. I was only a faint, tiny moon around Emily, the sun. That accounted for my early years. Emily received the new iPhone, and I handed her a hand-me-down including a damaged screen. I received the leftovers. She picked the brand-name garments. Every family gathering was the Emily show. "Did you hear about Emily's grades?" Dad would say to our cousins. "Straight A's. And she is the debate team captain." These talks taught me to fit in with the wallpaper. Not even my B's and C's, plus my place on the student council, would count. I was doing fine, not failing here. In my family, though, okay could just as well have been abysmal. "Natalie," Mom told me one day as I was helping her fold laundry, "you should really think about a practical career. Maybe something in a store or a restaurant. There's nothing wrong with honest work." Her remarks stung, but I was accustomed to the continual reminders of my expected limitations. The way hard they seemed to be working to bring me down was not something I was used to. Looking back, I see that all that followed sprang from those early years. The constant comparisons, the deft digs, the obvious message that I was somehow less than Emily, all left scars that would take years to heal. Sometimes, though, the strongest power comes from the darkest scars. None of my family knew how their therapy would finally affect every one of our lives. I still remember the day Emily received her letter of acceptance from her institution. The house started to go berserk. Dad brought home an expensive bottle of sparkling juice. Mom made her favorite dinner, and they stayed late organizing her future. Mom kept flashing, "Our brilliant girl is going to one of the best universities in the state. We have been saving for this from your birth, sweetheart." Picking at my food, I sat at the table wondering what my own celebration in 2 years might be like. I ought to have known better. When my time arrived, the picture was quite different. I joined groups, pushed my tail to earn good marks, and even attended extra classes to strengthen my college applications. Not one bit seemed to count. Mom's laugh was bitter and contemptuous when I brought up, "College? Natalie, be reasonable. We simply cannot afford to send you. Besides, you're not really college material." With a trembling voice, "But what about all the money you saved for Emily?" I said. Dad started to cough, clearly uncomfortable. "That was different. Emily had a clear path and outstanding grades. You, well, are more suited for practical work. Speaking of which, I could use another waitress at the diner." My ears let me estrange myself. "I could work while I study," I said. "Please help me get started. We could borrow from family or take out a loan. I'll pay back every penny with interest. I'll even get it in writing with a lawyer." "We never borrow from anyone on principle," Mom remarked icily. "You need to accept your limitations and find a suitable job. We do not borrow money, and we are not going to change our values for you." I sobbed myself to sleep that evening. But by dawn the tears had disappeared, and a fierce will took front stage. I went to my grandparents, the only people who had ever really believed in me. I told them at their kitchen table, "Grandma, Grandpa, I need your help." I opened to them. "I can't just quit college. I can't." Grandpa had sorrowful and angry eyes at the same time. "We don't have savings, sweetheart, but let me see what I can do. No grandchild of mine is going to have their dreams crushed like this." The next few weeks whirled around. First, the terrible disappointment of the bank rejecting our loan application. Grandpa's announcement that he was selling their old vacation cabin and the land it sat on shocked them then. The sale generated just enough for my tuition. Far from the continual reminders of my family's lack of faith, I applied to study finance at a place far away. Mom and Dad hardly bothered to bid farewell the day I went. Only my grandparents were at the bus station. Grandma was tightly holding me, while Grandpa claimed he wasn't wiping tears. I cut my parents off that day on. I remained with my grandparents in their little house when breaks rolled around, and I had to return to town. To me, their sacrifice was really vital. Every time I entered their small house, I was reminded of what true family ought to be. 4 years of relentless effort later, I at last earned a finance degree. Along with a clean new diploma, I returned to my hometown full of great dreams. The actual world, though, was not exactly throwing a red carpet. I sent out job applications for weeks, and I received only radio silence. At last, I found myself working for a tiny investment company. It was a beginning, rather than the high-powered career I had envisioned. Though nothing extravagant, I discovered a small flat on the outskirts of town paid for, with my own hard-earned money. Then arrived the call I never would have imagined. "Natalie?" Emily said on the other side of the line, her voice sickly sweet. "It's been ages. I would dearly love to catch up. You should come over for dinner this weekend." I accepted, even though something in her voice ought to have thrown off alarms. Perhaps everything had changed. Perhaps at last we could have an adult, normal relationship. I couldn't have been more mistaken. That evening when I got to Emily's residence, I realized right away I had stumbled onto a trap. Along with Emily's fiancé, some smart guy in an expensive suit who hardly glanced at me, my parents were already there. The second we sat down to eat began the interrogation. Mom started, "So Natalie," her fork dangling in midair, "tell us about this job of yours." With a steady voice, I said, "I'm working at an investment firm. It's modest, but—" Emily laughed and then cut me off. "Investment firm? You mean like one of those places that sells penny stocks? Honestly, you didn't need a college degree for that. Anyone could walk in off the street and get that job. Unlike Emily," Mom said, "who's a manager at the city bank, and Michael here." Michael nodded with a smug air. Mom piped up, "Top law firm in the state. I told you college wasn't necessary for you, dear. Such a waste of your grandfather's estate." Dad laughed and swirled his wineglass. "Hey, my offer still stands. Think how impressed the customers would be. Would you like fries with that? From someone with a college degree? Would you want an educated waitress at the diner?" Apart from me, they all screamed with laughter. I looked at my plate and pushed the food around the way I used to as a child. Though I had not yet addressed it, Emily questioned, "Where did you say you're living now?" "I located a spot on Elm Street," I said softly. The table sprang to theatrical gasps. "Elm Street?" Emily asked with widening faux concern. "Oh, Natalie, that's practically the worst neighborhood in the city. Only, people who can't afford better live there." She stopped for effect. Mom stage whiskered, "She means low lifes," and they all howled with amusement once more. I snapped something inside of me. Years of distance had not changed a bit. They remained the same nasty, critical people they had always been. I got up very quickly, and my chair screamed against the floor. "You know what? I'd rather be a lowlife than be like any of you," I spat out. "At least I got where I am without riding on someone else's coattails or living off Daddy's money." Ignoring their objections and charges, I hurried out with my handbag. I vowed to myself as I strolled into the night that this would be the last time I ever set foot in their presence. Life surprises you in odd ways. A fresh road becomes available just when you feel you have reached a dead end. One afternoon, my phone rang. I was still working at that little investment company, doing my best, but feeling stuck. Chloe was my former roommate in college. She basically yelled into the phone, "Natalie, you are not going to believe this. Remember how we always talked about working for Sterling Investments? They are looking for fresh talent and have an office in your city. I already put in a good word for you." My heart faltered. Among the most famous names in the financial industry was Sterling. I polished my CV the rest of the day and got ready for the interview next week. Walking into their makeshift office felt as though everything in my life had finally brought about this point. The interview was tough. They interrogated me on everything from sophisticated investment techniques to consumer trends. But all those extra hours I put in at my present employment, all the late evenings reading and researching, all paid off. 1 week later, I answered a call. I came in. I threw myself into the task from the first day. Others counted out at 5, but I stayed late honing my proposals and creating fresh investment plans. Managing a portfolio for a tech startup was my first major assignment. People began to notice when the first quarter return came out at 40%. During my 6-month review, my supervisor said, "Natalie, this is outstanding work." Along with the compliments came a bonus more than my prior job's pay annually. Still, it fell short. I pushed harder, took on more ambitious projects, and developed a reputation for transforming bad investments into gold mines. The bonuses were becoming larger, and I budgeted every dime. 2 years after beginning at Sterling, I came into a posh car showroom. An hour later, I was coming up to my grandparents' house in a sparkling new automobile, complete with a big red bow on top. The salesman most likely thought I was lost, until I pointed at their top-of-the-line model and said, "I'll take that one." I handed Grandpa the keys, and his jaw knocked against the floor. I still had to work, though. I closed on a gorgeous condo at the summit, the most posh new construction in the city, the following month. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a gourmet kitchen, and a vista from which you felt as though you controlled the planet. One morning, I encountered a familiar voice. As I was leaving my building carrying coffee, looking like she had seen a ghost, Emily stood there in her fancy exercise clothes. "What are you doing here?" I sipped slowly at my coffee, relishing the moment. "Oh, I live here," I remarked nonchalantly, indicating toward the penthouse level. "Actually, just bought it." Emily had an amazing look, shock, incredulity, and something else. I watched envy in the eyes of my perfect sister for the first time in our lives. 1 week after running across Emily, my phone rang. It stunned me to see my parents' number on the screen. They hadn't called in years. Their request, that they stop by, that they were in the neighborhood, even more shocking, was I agreed, more curious than anything else. Their faces on entering my condo were a picture. Dad stood nervously in the entryway, seemingly reluctant to touch anything, while Mom's gaze flicked from the floor to the celly windows, to the modern furniture. Mom managed, sliding a finger along my marble countertop. "This is quite impressive. You have to be doing rather nicely for yourself." I answered simply, "I am," and offered them chairs on my fluffy sofa. They looked at one another before Mom started to cough. "Well, Emily is engaged to Michael. They announced it last month at the engagement party. Obviously, an engagement celebration I hadn't been invited to." Mom said, "They're planning the wedding for 6 months from now," her voice sounding that old wheedling tone I knew from early life. "We've offered to pay half the expenses, as is traditional." Dad moved uneasily. "But it seems the overall budget is, well, it's $300,000. I choked almost on my own spit. $300,000? Mom said fast. "Michael's family has certain expectations. They're very prominent in the community. We announced we would cover half before we knew the amount. And now," she trailed off, staring at me deliberately, "now you need $150,000. I answered her. Mom smiled exactly. "And since you're doing so well, living in this beautiful condo, working at such a prestigious firm, you want me to give you the money?" I said squarely. "Loan," Dad said in an interruption. "We're asking for a loan. Naturally, we will pay you back. We will even have it notarized." Mom hurriedly said, "We know it's a lot, but we can't back out now. It would be so embarrassing with Michael's family. They are expecting a certain standard. Like when I wanted to go to college?" I asked, stopping. "When I begged you for help? When I offered to sign a legal paper promising to pay you back?" Mom blushed in front of me. "That was distinct." "Different how?" I questioned. "Because it was me asking? Because you told me you don't borrow money on principle?" "Natale, be reasonable," Dad said. "Reasonable?" I said as I got up. "Like you were reasonable when you told me I was not college material? When you offered me a waitress job instead of helping me get an education? When you let Grandpa sell his property to help me while you saved all your money for Emily?" Mom cried out, "That's not fair!" I approached the door and opened it. "No, what's not fair is that you're only here because you need something from me. You didn't invite me to the engagement party. You haven't spoken to me in years. Now you want $150,000? I don't loan money on principle. I believe that's a family tradition, isn't it?" Mom's cheeks flushed with rage. "How dare you toss our words back at us after everything we have done for you?" I laughed cruelly. "Everything you have done for me? Please leave now," Mom murmured about ingratitude, and Dad avoided eye contact as they hurried out. I felt as I closed the door behind them, a weight lift off my shoulders. From a strength standpoint, I had stood up to them on my own terms, in my own house, for the first time in my life. The following day, my phone rang once more. Emily was the one this time. She hardly gave a hello. "What is wrong with you?" she asked. Mom reported what happened. "How can you be so selfish?" Reclining back on my office chair, I watched the city lights dance across my panoramic windows. "Selfish? That's rich coming from you, Emily. We are family. Family helps each other. You have the money. Everyone knows you are doing well now. Why won't you help with my wedding?" I laughed almost at the ridiculousness. "Family now? Suddenly I'm family. What about when I was at your house and you all called me a lowlife? When you mocked where I lived? When you laughed at my job? Was I family then?" Emily objected, saying, "That was different. We were just teasing. You're being ridiculous now." No, what's ridiculous is that none of you spoke to me for years until you needed something. If you need money so badly, why not ask our parents? They're your real family after all. They made that clear enough over the years. You bitter, unappreciative, Emily exclaimed. You're still the same pathetic little sister who was never good enough. You think you're so much better than we are now with your fancy condo and big job. The line broke off. Surprised to discover her words no longer hurt, I sat there for a minute. All they did made me exhausted. A week later, I was following a custom I had maintained since college. Sunday supper at my grandparents' place. As Grandma presented the roast chicken, she seemed especially subdued. Grandpa said last night, his voice weighted, "Your parents called us." I set aside my fork. "Let me estimate. They begged for wedding money." Grandmother nodded. "They're getting desperate. I think your mother had rather a lot to say about family obligations when we told them we're retired and don't have that kind of money." Grandpa went on, "Your mother had the nerve to suggest we sell something. She said, 'Well, you sold the land for Natalie's college, didn't you?' She suggested we sell the car." "The car I gave you," I gasped. "She really advised you to sell your gift?" Grandpa added. That's when I hung up on her, with a flutter of gratification in his voice. Told her that, unlike some people, we do not sell presents from family members who really care about us. Grandma grabbed across the table and grasped my hand. Bound together by something more than simply blood, the three of us sat there, in knowing quiet. In a tiny community, word moves quickly. My parents made sure it moved even quicker. Their version of events had gone around our whole extended family and social network within weeks. I began to hear bits of their painstakingly created story from several sources. Not aware I was in the next aisle, my mother's friend hushedly at the grocery store asked, "Did you hear about the younger daughter? Got some nice job, and now she thinks she's too good for her own family. Says they're too poor for her now. Says she's not even talking to them anymore." Relatives would stare at me contemptuously at church when I attended with my grandparents. One evening, loaded with judgment, my Aunt Martha called. "Your mother told me you wouldn't even let her into your condo when she came to visit. How could you treat your own mother that way?" I could have straightened the records, could have told everyone how my parents had only reached out when they needed money, how they had never encouraged my goals, how they had laughed and denigrated me at every opportunity. But I had discovered long ago that trying to protect yourself from poisonous individuals merely fuels their ammunition. Rather, I paid attention to my work, visited with my grandparents, and let the rumors fly around me like leaves on a breeze. Enough was known by my grandparents. They had lived through every moment of truth and knew it. The wedding arrived and passed by. Of course, I was not invited, but I expected not to be. My grandparents politely noted past obligations when they turned down an invitation. That Saturday instead, we had a picnic in their backyard, firmly avoiding any reference to the tragedy occurring across town. The wedding pictures started showing up on social media 1 week later. One evening, wineglass in hand, I found myself leafing through them, closely examining the faces in every well-crafted photo. Emily was in her fancy gown, and Michael looked austere and official, his family gathered around him like costly sculptures, and my parents were easy to find in their new clothes, most likely purchased on credit. They were striving so hard to fit in this world of old money and country club memberships. Their poses were uncomfortable, and their smiles strained though. Not since before the wedding have I spoken with Emily or my parents. I probably will never do it again, but at last I feel at peace with that when seated here in my condo and watching the city lights create the night sky. Once destroyed, certain bridges ought to remain ashes. My fire shines more brilliantly than any I could have inherited. I built mine. Story 2. Sometimes one incident in life can set off a sequence of circumstances that either breaks or makes you why. Emily here. And I used to think of a masquerade ball as just a fun evening. But that evening set me down a rabbit hole of vengeance, strange meetings, and decisions that permanently altered the path of my life. Though you might believe you know the environment you live in, what would you do if you came onto a game considerably larger and more hazardous than you could have ever dreamed? This is a story of lies, of a friendship tried, of decisions now haunting my dreams. Enter my universe in which masks hide secrets that might either set you free or trap you permanently, not only cover faces. Along this road, be advised that once you're in, there is no turning back. I am Emily, hence this is my narrative. Alex's voice rang in my ears as I glanced at the picture on my phone. I swear it's just a business dinner, Em. The picture was blurry, but I knew the little corner booth of the Gilded Spoon, that trendy new restaurant downtown, was there. Alex was seated there in the low light, laughing, his arms softly encircling a woman, most obviously not from his workplace. Hell, she hardly came from our planet, possibly a model. Alternatively, some social media guru with precisely shaped cheekbones. And that outfit absolutely not business wear. Over me came a tsunami of nausea. Living together for the past 2 years, we had 6 years of dating. Sure, there had been ups and downs. However, this is something I never would have seen. I laughed to the empty flat, feeling misled and dumb. Just business. Though right now it seemed like the only language my broken heart understood. Revenge wasn't anything I believed in. Paced the living room, and a design started to take shape. My side of the element of surprise was Alex was not aware I knew about his little secret, and as I considered it, the annual masquerade ball, an event he had been waiting for weeks, presented the ideal chance. Alex had been talking about it non-stop, stressing its value for his career in the company and for networking. If I played my cards well, I could show him in front of everyone that counted, but skepticism crept in before the concept completely developed. Is my action too hasty? I thought. Perhaps there is a logical reason, but the sight of his hand on her waist disproved every hopeful idea. I phoned Chloe, my buddy, and the source of the damning picture. I'm in, she answered before I had to ask. We have always loved classic revenge stories from novels and movies over the years. Still, this was real, with great stakes. She advised us to create it symbolic, a parody on our preferred stories of retribution. Our brainstorming cleared the path more clearly. Instead of Emily, his devoted girlfriend, I would crash the ball as a mystery visitor guiding him through a night he would never remember. The days before the ball were a whirlpool. I pretended not knowing with Alex while I got ready. My nighttime ritual became dress fittings, mask choices, and practicing the persona of my alter ego. Every time I considered the approaching confrontation, a mix of exhilaration and fear, my heart raced. Is this too radical? I ask questions all the time, but then my objective would be grounded in the scenario at the Gilded Spoon, playing back in my head. The evening the ball was scheduled arrived sooner than expected. With elaborate masks hiding identities, the great hall shimmered in tones of gold and red, generating a mystery and intrigue. Alex stood there, seeming arrogant in his well-fitting suit. Watching from a distance, I wondered how he would respond when the game started. Remember, make him want to chase you, Chloe murmured into my ear. She was there to help me, dressed just as ostentatively, but she would stay in the background, my quiet protector. As I started on the dance floor, my heart hammered like a drum. The dimming lights produced the eerie waltz melody filling the air. I walked elegantly, allowing the music to lead me, so Alex's eye would find me. And then find me it did. Our eyes locked, and I could see the perplexity and inquiry whirling in his. I danced away, grinning slyly to call him. The hunt has started. Alex tried repeatedly to approach me as the evening drew on. Every time I would slip away, he would get more fascinated. Seemed fascinated. He was furiously attempting to find the name of the enigmatic woman who had caught his eye. Every action deliberate, every glance meant to pull him more into my web. I let him corner me on a quiet balcony at last toward midnight. The city lights glittered beneath us, a subdued background to our approaching conflict. I talked in a voice I thought he wouldn't recognize as he approached, trying to glimpse beneath my mask. Do you like game playing, Alex? He hesitated, then murmured, Who are you? I inhaled deeply, preparing to unveil all and bring my idea to its culmination. Then I took off my mask gradually. Shock widening his eyes, he tried to recognize the familiar face under the mask, but I fast restored my mask, keeping my enigmatic aura, before he could really understand it. I muttered, fiddling with the mask's ribbon's ends, You didn't answer my question. There was a spark of identification, but confusion soon seized. Emily? He said, stammering. I wouldn't let him, though, violate my character. In a light-hearted voice, Ah, names. So binding, so revealing, I said, circling him. Tonight, I'm not Emily, just a curious soul, wondering why men play games. Can you tell me, Alex? He choked, the weight of the circumstances gradually sinking in on him. This is about dinner, isn't it? He asked, clearly anxious now, and his polished manner collapsing. Looking out at the metropolis, I remarked aloud, I saw an interesting photo recently. A man claimed he was at business dinner, but it didn't seem like business to me. What do you think? Alex's expression turned blank. He opened his mouth, apparently looking for the proper words. Emily, I can clarify. It's not, I said, shh, pointing a finger to his lips. Remember, it's about games tonight, not about explanations. My phone buzzed at that point. Chloe gave perfect timing. Another picture, a close-up of Alex with the same woman captured just hours before at the pub next to the main hall, lighted the screen. I noted casually, looks like your business associate is here tonight too. This time he appeared really startled. I swear, Emily, it's just a coincidence. I didn't know she would be here. Or another game? I asked, savoring the advantage. How about this, Alex? You get a piece of the truth for every riddle you solve. And maybe, by the end, you'll understand the rules of the game you started. He nodded tentatively. Okay, what's the first riddle? I slipped him a little card. Your next clue will be revealed from the golden chalice at the bar. I observed from the shadows for the next hour as Alex fervorously looked for hints. Everyone was meant to guide him further into a labyrinth of self-awareness. Chloe and I had meticulously placed references to our common past, and the trust he would have so readily shattered throughout the site. Every finding made me see him growing more unhappy, his confident manner totally disrupted. Every hint reflected a moment when he had to face his duplicity in behavior. Under a large crystal chandelier in the vast ballroom, he discovered the last clue, a tiny box with a ring inside, a copy of the promise band he had handed me years ago. Promises are meant to be kept, not broken, notes attached. Pulling myself from the darkness, my disguise still on. Song over, Alex. Did you find what you were looking for? He seemed demoralized, his actions weighing down on him. Emily, I'm so sorry. I get lost, distracted, but it's not what you think. I never meant to hurt you. Then educate me, I said, staring right into his. A familiar voice cut off just as Alex started to talk. Emily? Turning to find the woman from the picture, the business associate, both of us looked perplexedly. She was clutching a similar scavenger hunt card. Her eyes flickering between me and Alex, she questioned, "What's going on?" Everything became clear all of a sudden. There were other players in this game than Alex. Alex's voice broke with incredulity as the woman took off her disguise to expose herself. My friend. I had to curb a laugh. This was most likely the least predicted outcome of all the ones Alex could have envisioned. Hello, Alex, Chloe answered, cynicism flowing from her lips as she savored the celebration. Alex's face showed confusion, anxiety, and then insight. Wait, this was all... Why? Chloe drew nearer, her shoes clicking menacingly on the marble floor. You see, Alex, you play with both of us when you game with one of us. It's like a package deal, didn't you know? Best friends share everything, even revenge plots. His deceit, his betrayal, that was all he was, I said. We just brought it to light in the most interesting manner. The ballroom had an amazing energy. Whispers of the drama developing reverberated among the other veiled visitors. Some grabbed their phones, keen to record the occasion. Alex stammered, his confidence now destroyed. You both played me, Chloe added smugly. Looks like the tables have turned, putting an arm around me. In this game of deception, we proved to be the better players. A part of me still cared even as much as I was savoring Alex's demise. Taking a long breath. Alex, I added, it wasn't just about revenge. You can't toy with people's emotions and expect no consequences. Nina nodded. Your taste of your own medicine? How does it feel to be on the other side? Silence descended the great ballroom, the anxiety evident. Alex's shoulders slumped as his axe pressed down on him. At last he murmured, real regret shining in his eyes. I never wanted any of this. Chloe laughed sarcastically. Neither did we, but occasionally, life has a funny way of serving justice. Starting from the rear of the room, a slow clap gathered pace as more visitors joined in, a mix of amusement and reverence on their expressions. I felt a tsunami of both sadness and relief. Game over, Alex. Chloe and I turned to go, and I glanced one more at him. In the middle of the ballroom he stood, defeated and alone. I felt both guilty about him and vindicated about another part of me. Chloe said, Come on, in whispers. Let us enjoy the party and bid the past behind us. Arm in arm, we left with perfect execution of our strategy. Little did I know, though, the evening still had a few shocks ahead. Fourth, roses and shadows. The truth of our achievement started to sink in as Chloe and I made our way through the assembly. We had masterfully planned the ideal retribution, a concoction of smug gratification and residual conflict permeating the scene. Every step felt like a victory march, but a persistent doubt started to slink into my consciousness as the first exhilaration subsided. Having gone too far, Alex, defeated and alone, kept playing back in my head. My thoughts were jumbled when Chloe grabbed at my arm, wide-eyed. She muttered, pointing to the far end of the ballroom. A black cloak-draped person stood there, his face hidden by a fancy silver mask. The fact that he stood next to the image Alex had commissioned, the one that had begun it all, grabbed our attention more than the costume. He clutched in his palm a red rose much like the one Alex had handed me at that horrible business dinner. With my back of neck hairs on end, I whispered, "Who is that?" "I don't know," Chloe said, sounding worried, "but he's been watching us since we entered." Choosing to face the enigmatic stranger, we headed toward him. He turned as we got closer, his gaze fixated on me and sending a spookiness down my spine. "You have to be the highlight of tonight's performance," he remarked, his voice soft and deep. "Your little scheme was rather instructive." With heart hammering, "Who are you?" I asked. The man laughed, and that sound made my teeth jangle. "A simple observer drawn in by the game you two ran." Chloe moved forward, her defensive impulses triggered. "What do you wish?" He grinned to expose a pair of shockingly white teeth. "Just to offer my congrats, and maybe a warning." "A warning?" I said, uncertainty and worry raging inside me. "Indeed," he said, his voice like silk over steel. "While you might have won tonight, be wary of resting on your laurels. There are bigger games afoot, with athletes far more clever than dear Alex." Anxiety knotted in my stomach. "Are you putting threats on us?" He laughed, a sound like a cold breeze filling the hall. "No, just giving a piece of advice. Tonight, you savored the excitement of dishonesty and retribution, but such games can be addictive, and not everyone you might cross in the future will be as easy to outmaneuver as Alex." The weight of his comments fell mostly on us. Although our retribution felt right, had we unintentionally set ourselves up for something more dangerous? The enigmatic man set the crimson rose on a table not far away. "Remember this, Rose," he murmured low in voice. "Every action has consequences. The world is full of shadows and secrets." He slipped into the throng with that cryptic message, shocking Chloe and me. The remaining evening was a blur. Although we tried to enjoy the party, the meeting with the man wearing a mask had lengthy shadow over the celebrations. The early morning chill met us like a premonition as we walked from the ballroom. Chloe came to me, her brow wrinkled. "Do you think he was serious about the larger games?" I considered a moment, the frigid air crystallizing my worries. "I'm not sure, but one thing's for sure. Our little revenge scheme might have opened a door we can't readily close." Chloe nodded, snuggling her shawl closer. "We'll face it together, whatever comes up." And with that unspoken pledge between best friends, we headed into the evening not knowing the adventures or obstacles ahead. The next several days were disturbing. I felt as though I could be monitored wherever I went. Every squeak in my condo, every leaf rustling outside my window, every unplanned phone call set my heart pounding. One evening I said to Chloe, "I can't live like this." We were in her flat, the TV running some meaningless show in the background, its importance lost among our fears. Every moment feels like a countdown to something, and I have no idea what. "Always the rock." Chloe gripped my hand. "We just need some kind of closure. We have to figure out that man was." "But how?" we asked, devoid of a name, a lead, anything save a silver mask and a cryptic warning. But our accidental meeting came from another direction. A few days later, a fancy envelope arrived on my front porch. One word dominated the front: invitation. I opened it warily. Inside was a card indicating time, date, and address. At the bottom, a black sketch of a silver mask. My hand shook. The enigmatic man was stretching out. I got right on phoning Chloe. "We have to go," she stated firmly. "We must have answers if we ever wish peace of mind." The address brought us to the outside of town, an old mansion, our hearts heavy with anxiety. We were outside its great doors on the scheduled evening. We inhaled deeply, then went inside. Inside was a mix of grandeur and ruin. From the ceiling, dusty chandeliers hung with their crystals catching the low light. Worn-out tapestries covered the walls. The man in the middle of the hall, surrounded by a circle of seats, was still sporting his silver mask. "Welcome," he said, pointing for us to settle in. We hesitated to settle in, our senses sharpened. "As you have most likely guessed, I have been observing you," he said. Your little game with Alex caught the interest of people like me, those who play a far more dangerous game, though it was entertaining. I stammered. Who are you? He pulled off his mask to see a middle-aged man with sharp features and piercing eyes. I am Lysander, and I represent a society that thrives on challenges, games of wit, strategy, and occasionally, danger. He leaned forward. I brought you here to offer you a place in our society. Your handling of Alex revealed intelligence and resourcefulness, traits we value. My pulse ran. Did this present a trap or an opportunity? And if we refuse? Lysander gave a shrug. You walk away. Remember, whether you play with us or against us is up to you. Life is a game. Chloe and I cast looks at each other. This exceeded any kind of plot for retribution. It was a crossroads our future would be shaped by. Chloe remarked at last, We need time to decide. Lysander nodded, then put his mask back on. Of course, but keep in mind the clock is running. We left the mansion with the weight of the choice. One could consider this as a chance to explore a realm of mystery and thrill. Conversely, it promised risk and uncertainty. Chloe and I argued, considered our alternatives, and looked at our needs for evenings. And we reached our decision after many hours of meditation. Approaching Lysander, we turned down his offer. Indeed, the taste of retribution, the excitement of the game, was addictive. Some doors, nevertheless, once opened cannot ever be closed, and we were not prepared for the future, which was yet uncertain. Lysander honored our choice, and as promised, let us go. Our lives went back to some degree of routine, but we came to value the ordinary. Years went by, and the memory of that fatal night at the masquerade and the enigmatic invitations started to fade. Every once in a while, though, I would discover a solitary red rose on my doorway, a mute reminder of the game we used to play and the decisions we made when the night was calm and the shadows grew long. Therefore, while I write this narrative, my point of view is straightforward. Although the excitement of the game could be seductive and revenge could taste good, always keep in mind that every decision has results. Also, occasionally the cost could be excessive.